Thank you for joining us for the BPM Change Management PRR Review Monthly Meeting. My name is Nicole Hines, representing the ISO Customer Readiness, and I will be facilitating today's conference. Today's call is being recorded. These recordings are for informational and convenience purposes only, and any related transcript should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. As a reminder, these monthly calls are structured to stimulate honest dialogue and engage different perspectives. While we welcome comments and questions, please remember to keep comments professional and respectful. We will be taking questions throughout the call today, and if you are dialed in by phone only and not the Webex, you can enter the question queue at any time by pressing #2 on your telephone keypad. If you connected audio through your Webex platform, please use the raise hand feature located above the chat box on the lower right-hand side of your screen. Please introduce yourself before asking your question. If you need technical assistance during this call today, please send a chat message to the event producer. The purpose of today's meeting is to discuss the proposed revision requests that are in the initial or recommendation stage for the process. Today we'll be discussing 28 PRRs, 11 are in the initial stage, 17 are in the recommendation stage, 27 PRRs were submitted by the ISO, and 1 PRR was submitted by SRP. The purpose of the BPM is to set forth business practice that implements the ISO tariff. The ISO conducts the yearly policy initiative roadmap process to consider and rank initiatives. Policy changes submitted through the PRR process will be referred to the policy initiative roadmap, and each subject area in a BPM is based on enabling language in the ISO tariff. The PRR process cannot be used to introduce changes that are not supported by existing tariff authority. Our first BPM we're going to discuss today is the Demand Response BPM. We have PRR 1438 in the initial stage, and I will hand it over to Elaine to discuss this PRR.
Thanks, Nicole. Good morning, everyone. So the reason for the change to the demand response is to add Section 17 to account for non-participating demand response scheduling and to have references pointing to the EIM BPM. We also added Section 18 to account for non-participating demand response in the Automated Load Forecast System, or Alph, and to have references pointing back to the EIM BPM. We did receive one comment and essentially has 2 questions in it. The first question asked if a EIM entity can be located within the state, for example, an IOU or a municipal utility, and if so, could they use the RSC process to account for load modifying DR? And so the answer to that would be that the WEIM entities using the RSC model may be located within the state of California. However, this model was designed to address DR participation that does not meet the metering and telemetry requirements for the CAISO's PDR and RDR models. So RSC was not considered for IOUs that exist within the CAISO's BAA and utilize the CAISO's PDR and RDR models. Therefore, in this instance, where a DR that does not fit into the current PDR and RDR model, the CAISO would expect to see it reflected in the forecast and would be considered in the RSC for subsequent intervals. The question also had asked under what conditions would a non-participating DR be used in the RSC versus Alph. And I just want to point everyone back to the diagram that is presented in the Demand Response BPM under Section 18, and that would essentially guide them through how we consider whether to use the RSC versus the Alph system. Are there any questions?
Okay, I don't see any questions. Thank you, Elaine. just as a note, our our initial comment period expired on May 17th, and our next step is to post the recommendation. The next BPM we're going to be talking about is our generator management. PRR 1430 is in the recommendation stage, and I'm going to hand that over to Jill to discuss that PRR.
Thanks, Nicole. The reason for this revision is to update the language to reflect changes made in the Contract Management Enhancements Initiative. There were no comments for the recommendation comment period that expired on May 17th, and our next step is to post our final decision. Are there any questions on this PRR? Okay. The next one is PRR 1428 for the generator interconnection procedures. And this one was also to align with the updates made in the Contract Management Enhancements Initiative. There were no comments for the recommendation comment period that expired on May 17th, and our next step is to post the final decision. Are there any questions on this PRR? Okay, thank you, Nicole.
Thanks, Jill. The next BPM we're going to talk about is the generator interconnection and deliverability allocation procedures. PRR 1420 and 1417, both are in the recommendation stage, and I'm going to hand it over to Dawn to discuss these PRRs. And Dawn, I show that you are muted on the Webex. Maybe you were double muted there.
Yes, I was double muted. Thank you very much, Nicole. The reason for this revision is to remove the use of least squares allocation methodology and to clarify what methods will be used in the operational deliverability assessment and transmission plan deliverability allocation. We did not receive any comments for the comment period that concluded May 17th of 2022, and the next step is to post the final decision. Any questions? Okay. This next PRR 1417 is to update the section to include the process details and links to associated documents. There were no comments on this one for the comment period that expired May 17th of 2022, and the next step is to post the final decision. Any questions?
As a reminder, if you have questions, you can hit #2 on the telephone keypad or the raise hand icon if you are logged into the WebEx. I'm going to pause here for a second. We did have a chat question that came in. Can we unmute Luke Tugas? He had a question on PRR 1438. He said there was some technical issues, so I'll go back to that PRR.
Sure, I believe he has raised his hand. Let me go ahead and unmute his line.
Yes, hi, good morning. This is Luke Tugas from the California Efficiency and Demand Management Council. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. I apologize for my technical difficulties. I appreciate you stepping backwards. So regarding PRR 1438, you said that the WEIM entity using the RSE model may be located within California, but that the DR, the non-participating DR, could be used. Of the EIM entity can only be used to reduce their load forecast if it doesn't meet the PDR and RDR model requirements. And so I guess my follow-up question is, if let's say you're an IOU in California or a CCA, for instance, or something like that, does that mean that if you happen to have a DR program, let's say as an example, that does not meet the requirements to participate in the ISO market as a PDR or an RDRR, then they would be eligible to potentially count that DR program in their load forecast, or is this only referring to the context of the WEIM market? And forgive me, I'm not super well versed in this particular topic, and so if I'm asking a foolish question, please bear with me.
Thank you
This
for
is Amber Motley. I can take.
Okay, great, Amber.
Yeah. The one thing, there is a section within the tariff, especially the day-ahead market tariff, that talks about demand response adjustments for the LSE IOUs. That's section 31.5.3.1.2, demand response adjustments. That is the process that's followed for the LSEs within the CAISO footprint and how it gets reflected in the CAISO forecast of CAISO demand. So I would point to that section as it relates to the LSEs and the IOUs.
Got it. Thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate that.
There is also a section in there, and it depends. There is an MSS adjustment section too, but I would refer to those two areas for the LSE section.
I apologize, Amber. I was muted and unmuted, and so I didn't quite hear what you just said there, that last part.
Within the same tariff area, there's an MSS adjustment as well for MSS versus non-MSS, if that's needed.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. And sorry, I just want to make sure. I think that covered all my questions. I just want to double check. Oh, also, okay. And with that tariff language that you just referred me to, does that also address the conditions under which the ISO folks decide whether or not by folks that made a short-term forecasting group, whether or not they would deem a specific DR program to be beneficial or non-beneficial to enhance the accuracy of the ISO forecast of EIM demand?
This is Elaine. No, that's where you would go back to the demand response BPM, section 18. There's a diagram in there that essentially shows how that would be considered.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate your help.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for jumping back. Let me go ahead to our next PR. So 1 second while I flip through the slides we've already discussed. The next BPM is reliability requirements, PRR 1423 and 1424. Both of those are in the recommendation stage, and I'm going to hand it over to Melanie to discuss these two PRRs.
Hi, everybody. PR 1424 is short long start definitions update. So the reason for this revision is to remove all references to medium start units in compliance with the revised tariff definitions of short and long start resources. There were no comments, and the next step is to post final decision. Were there any questions on this PR? All right. Next PR is 1423, which is Contract Management 2021 Update. The reason for this revision was to include the retention of interconnection service rights with the retention of deliverability rights due to the COMA 2021 updates. There were no comments, and the next step is to post final decision. Are there any questions on this PR?
All right, thanks, Melanie. As a reminder, if anyone has any questions, please hit #2 or the raised hand icon in the Webex. I'm going to jump ahead in our presentation because we have a timing limitation for somebody who can support PRR 1402. So, one's too far. So I'm going to jump over to PRR 1402, which is one that we've been in the recommendation stage while the ISO discusses it. I'm going to hand it over to Michael Martin to discuss 1402, and then I will go back to the previous BPM that we were speaking about. So, Michael?
Okay, good morning. 1402 is updates to an attachment O, which clarifies aftermarket cost recovery process, which is available for extremely long start resources. As Nicole mentioned, we've been addressing a handful of questions, and this is now in the recommendations comments timeframe. SRP has, we responded to the last set of questions here on, I'm checking here, just 2 days ago. The extended comment period did expire May 17th. We also have Kevin in our policy group here for any detailed questions. Any questions on 1402?
Okay, not hearing any questions or seeing any hands raised. I'm going to go back to where we were. Thank you for letting me jump out of order with the BPM presentation today. I appreciate that. So the next BPM we're going to talk about is the energy imbalance market. After that, we'll have market operations and then market instruments. I say all three of those together because Michael's going to go through all those PRRs with you. So I'm going to hand it over to Michael to discuss the rest of the PRRs for these three BPMs.
Okay, very good. This is 1440. This is the enhancements to the RSC evaluation test per the phase 1 initiative project. So this PRR changes to the EIM BPM, and it reflects numerous changes, about a dozen changes, improvements, enhancements to the RSC engine. We did receive comments from SRP. One of them was specifically more an example, better clarification on MSG online supply condition, that enhancement, which we added an additional attachment to that PRR. And this is set as emergency. And I want to note this because we're planning this to be effective June 1. It's in the post-recommendation state right now. Any questions on this one? Okay. Without objection, moving on to 1441. This is ramp rate limitation for certain inverter-based resources. So this is a change to our market ops BPM to better handle when inverter-based resources don't have what we call a smart controller or controller to follow dispatches. In a more specific case, the master file set, your master file ramp rate might be 9999, which means you go from 0 to your full output in just about a moment. The specific language speaks to setting the master file to 20% of your master file, which is still fast. That means in 5 minutes, you could go from 0 to your full output. We did have comments from Edison on this, and I also have Clyde Butan from our principal from our renewables implementation group on the call with us today. Any questions on this one?
We do have a caller on the line. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Rhett from Southern California Edison. I was wondering if you would explain this potentially a little bit more, or if our comments stand as is. If you don't have any more explanation towards this, maybe I could ask a question to say that if you have a resource that isn't able to be controlled, how would you expect it to ramp smoothly?
So I can, Clyde, you might be muted. I can start off one step. It's two steps, both physically and market setting. Market setting would be the master file. Then, of course, by dispatch, the market would honor that ramp rate. Now, if you don't have any sort of smart controller, so that is the spirit of this BPM. Without any means to control, this is it's turning into a reliability issue. Having resources go from 0 to full output, and so we're attempting to put in something reasonable to limit that reliability impact.
Yeah, I guess I can understand the concern. It just feels like you're codifying something that's physically impossible in many cases. And so it doesn't seem like it would be appropriate to ask a resource to do something it's not physically capable of doing.
Well, I think that's the reason why we impose this ramp rate or this max ramp rate. So in other words, let's say you participate in the energy market. The intent here is, moving from one dot to the next. You would be able to do that in a linear manner. So this is an attempt to, to have inverter-based resources linearly ramp. So this change is only going to apply for inverter-based resources without a smart control.
Yeah, again, I guess I get your intent, but without the ability to actually physically ramp at that rate, I'm not sure what you're going to, actually achieve other than set a standard that's not achievable.
Well, so what's not clear to me is we have resources, as Mike said, with a 999 ramp rate. So if we impose a ramp rate that's substantially less than 999, why would that be difficult for an inverter-based resource to make that ramp rate?
There are older resources that are essentially non-controllable, such that the only way to reduce output is to, open a breaker. And so you don't have those type of fine controls to be able to take it down in a controlled manner.
So you're saying there are some resources out there, if we ask that resource to move, it would ramp as fast as it could. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
And there's no way that we could slow that down?
Not for some of the older technologies. The ones that do have the ability to ramp are already, ramping as best as possible according to DOP.
Right. Okay, so, well, we need to discuss that a little more, internally here, but as Michael was saying, it's a reliability issue when let's say we ask a unit to go from from 50 megawatts to 100 megawatts. When we get that 100 megawatts within, let's say, the first minute, it causes a lot of issues for us in that we have to reg down to maintain a balance between supply and demand. So it's really a control issue for us.
So it's Michael. So why don't we, at this point, go ahead and take the detailed conversation offline, maybe email or add more comment to the PRR, and let's just work together and figure out what the best course for everyone is.
Okay. Yeah, Mike, I think that's the best way to deal with it.
Hi, this is Nicole. You can email the ISO at bpm_cm@kaiso.com with your additional information, and I will pass it on to the appropriate team.
Looks like we have another caller on Webex. They unraised their hand, so it's okay.
Go ahead. You may be muted.
They decided to lower their hand.
Okay. Okay. Then without objection, let's go to 1433, enforcement of aggregate capacity constraints. So this is a revision in section that discusses actions that co-located resources can utilize when they exceed their ACC constraint. And this is, we did receive comments from Edison on this. We also have Kevin Head, I believe, is on the call for additional questions if we have any. This is just wrapping up on that one. It's in the post-recommendation phase.
We have another caller in the audio line. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, sorry, this is Rhett again from Southern California Edison. Trying to recall our comments on this. I believe our comments on this were around handling multiple scheduling coordinators which share one ACC. I didn't see if the ISO had a written response to our comments or not. Maybe we can just talk about it now.
Sure, that's correct. I actually replied in the announcements section, the very top of the PRR. So the thing here is the tariff says that we have to use the interconnection customer, the IC, instead of just the scheduling coordinator. So upon first read, I'll be honest, when we looked at it, your comment looked completely feasible until we checked with legal. So to make such a change, we'd have to change the tariff. The BPM, is the playbook of the tariff, not the other way around. So at this point, we can only just encourage you to work with the IC and your multiple SCs. And if this is an issue, pursue a tariff change.
Okay.
Fred, this is Mike Turner. Let me jump in.
Yeah.
And that's, I understand your perspective there in regards to the coordination of the scheduling coordinators for that sort of agreement between the PMAX values of co-located resources. But as Michael had mentioned, the tariff section specifically puts that responsibility on the interconnection customer. So at this point, we're putting this process in place, and so we're going to maintain the reference to the interconnection customer, who also should be working with all the scheduling coordinators to make sure that they're in alignment with the information. If this doesn't turn out to work out very well, then perhaps we can pursue that tariff change that Michael referred to. That'd be the way we'd have to approach it.
So if the interconnection customer and one of the scheduling coordinators were essentially the same, it puts the other scheduling coordinator a bit of a disadvantage at this point.
Potentially, but obviously the interconnection customer, in essence, should be aware of the scheduling coordinators they're utilizing to schedule and dispatch those resources, and needs to do whatever they've got set up contractually for this sort of situation. I'm hoping those sorts of things were taken into account when contracts were created.
Yeah, we'd all hope so, right? Right. You guys at the pointy tip of the spear and guys at the other side of it. So, okay, so I guess maybe then I'm trying to understand here. After 14 days, like what's going to trigger the ISO taking unilateral action? Is it just meeting 14 days and not having a response? 14 days. I also see there's a 7-day deal in here. Kind of, what are you thinking? Like the process actually, is? And when do automatic things start happening? Yeah.
Sure. So at a high level, we're looking for a response within 7 days from the interconnection customer, sending that information via the scheduling coordinator, explaining the exceedance and what they're doing to address the issue. If we haven't gotten, and so this is what the PRR language is kind of getting to, is that if we haven't gotten either a confirmation that it's resolved within 14 days, we'll go ahead and implement this pro rata cut, unless we've gotten a different pro rata allocation from the interconnection customer by that date. And there's an email that that's supposed to be sent to. So it's really about resolving it within 14 days, or we need to go ahead and do this pro rata cut.
Okay, so what does resolution look like?
So
is it 14 days of not having any other exceedances? Is it, EDOS, EDAS, or RDT team making a, going out and looking at control systems to see that they've made a change to code? What does resolution look like?
Yeah. So certainly we don't necessarily believe that the issue can be solved, and then have to have 14 days of not exceeding in order to consider it resolved. Rather, it's about identifying what the issue is and fixing that issue. And I would expect that, even if it's on the 13th day, if we get written confirmation that the issue is resolved, then that would end the triggering timeline. We will continue to monitor it, and if it exceeds again, then another notice would go out. So this could obviously occur a couple times as different issues may be causing the exceedance. And it's not until you do that testing and confirmation that we can make sure that we've got the right control systems programmed and in place to avoid those exceedances.
Okay. Is there any dispute process built in such that you guys detect that there was an exceedance, but all of the interconnection customers' data says that there wasn't? Or perhaps that there was a faulty dispatch which instructed them to exceed ACC, right? What's the process for, I guess, stopping the timeline or disputing the findings? How'd that work?
Sure. So that's what that first 7 days is meant to reference. So we're basically giving 7 calendar days to provide a response to us, explaining the exceedance and any steps taken to address the issue. And it would be in that written response that we would be looking for either, hey, I was dispatched above. Here are my dispatch signals, and they total greater than the ACC that was in place. Or, you know, information that says, you know, here's my telemetry, and, you know, it doesn't show it exceeding. And that's what we've been doing, has been providing the backup information as well, so it can be corroborated against the information at the site. And so any issues in that time frame need to be captured in that 7-day response to us so that we can investigate them and work through the process here.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks, Mike.
No problem, Rhett. Thank you.
Okay. Let's go to the next one. 1432, addition of 15 interval threshold to the regulation service minimum performance testing. So essentially, I call it a process improvement for resources that do not provide at least 15 resources in one calendar month. We also have Mike Turner here as a representative of the group that does this. For any questions? I don't believe we received, we did receive one question from Sentinel Energy, which I believe was a request to discuss this and other items in policy. And no other questions specific to this change.
We have a caller on Webex.
Go ahead. You might be muted.
Can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
Yes, it's Bill Kissinger. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Hi, this is Bill Kissinger from Morgan, Lewis & Bockius in San Francisco. I'm calling on behalf of Sentinel Energy Center, and I apologize. I've lost my voice, so I'll try and speak up. We appreciate the change that was made. It's at least a partial fix to a longstanding problem with the tariff, where you would be decertified if you failed to meet the performance standard in a given month. You'd be decertified if in 2 successive months if you weren't called at all to provide any regulation, that would be deemed as an additional failure, and you would be automatically decertified. The 15 intervals of regulation service in a following calendar month somewhat addresses the problem, but it really doesn't get to the heart of the problem, as we noted in our comment letter. The heart of the problem is that the standard where you have these microburst dispatches of regulation, sometimes for 20 seconds, don't work on large spinning mass like a combustion turbine of Sentinel's nature, where it just can't react in that time frame. One fix would be to get at that underlying problem, where you would not count very short microburst periods of regulation relative to the performance standard. But another way in thinking about it would be to further modify the BPM so that rather than be an automatic decertification when you have 2 months of 50 intervals of regulation service provided, that instead of automatically decertifying, you just provide notice of the ISO's intent to decertify within so many days absent successful recertification by the unit. I think that would fix this problem for units like Sentinel, which seldom get called to provide regulation, but don't have even clarity as to how often they've been called to provide regulation in a given month. If it's gotten a performance standard failure notice, if it got a notice then subsequently that there were 2 months that met the new standard of 15 intervals of regulation service in a calendar month, it would, and then given a number of days in which to conduct the recertification, it could do the recertification. And I think that would solve this problem. right now the revision at BPM doesn't really fix the problem. When we get notice, we're just going to go ahead and recertify, and that's going to result in us having to take the unit offline to do the recertification. That's not a good thing for the ISO, and it's needless expense and time from personnel.
So this is Mike Turner, and thank you for expressing those comments. It's also something we've heard from others as well, and in pursuing kind of a solution to this, absent a wholesale change of the tariff in this area, we have made these BPM tweaks to try to facilitate a more optimal certification and recertification process. And so I understand about, just automatically recertifying. We did tweak the language slightly here in a way that without the 15 intervals, it's not considered a decertification. So, please double check. And if you want, I can, talk with you offline in regards to the specific language in that regard. We have forwarded the rest of your comments, though, to our policy team so that they are aware of them, and they were previously, but your additional comments, help support the potential stakeholder process that we would have to engage in order to change this pay-for-performance regulation aspect of our tariff. So,
yeah,
thank you for submitting that.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I guess the only thing I'd add is the question at the heart, and maybe it's with the policy team, I need to take it up, is if you could just get rid of the automatic decertification or make it automatic after some number of days so as to allow the unit to then do the recertification, that would, I think, cut out a great number of recertification tests that are currently being done by Sentinel because it just doesn't have clarity about when it's, when the sort of decertification notice is going to hit them. So that's something to consider. I'll take that up with the policy folks.
Yep. Okay. Include me in that as well, if you would, please.
Will do, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's proceed. We're cutting close on time. 1429, guidance to scheduling coordinators for registering high priority wheels. This is language that now is in the post-final decision process. We haven't received any comments and any questions or concerns about these revisions. Okay, 1415, this is the counterpart to the previous PRR, I think it was 1424, on long and short start definitions. It's mirroring the same thing. We're getting rid of the medium start resource designation. We did receive comments. We responded to SRP without objection or any other questions.
As a reminder, if you are on the phone, you can hit #2, or in your Webex, hit the raise hand icon.
Okay, PRR 1413. These are changes that mirror the ISO's switch to the EEA standard, NERC standard. There's small changes to the BPM, and we didn't receive any comments or concerns. That, by the way, started May 1st, so we are already on the EEA system. Any questions or concerns with 1413? Okay, now looking at the market instruments BPMs, we have 3 here. Let's look at 1439. This is the market resource, market instruments definition changes to a number of transparency reports, OASIS CMRI, for both the RSC project and the transmission service market scheduling priority project. These outline the new reports. There's a couple new reports, a couple new fields, all laid out. We didn't receive any questions or concerns on this PRR. Okay. PRR 1434 is a proxy demand response for resources bidding over $1,000. This describes when, in certain conditions, RDR resources may submit over the bid cap, and this is in the post-recommendation stage. We have not received any questions, comments, or concerns. And 1414 is also, it's in post-final decision, short and long starts, definition and related to the ESDR initiative and a series of other edits, including the safe harbor 5 megawatt threshold. During the entire process, we haven't received any questions or comments, and it's now in post-final decision. So any questions or concerns about those changes? Okay. And lastly, 1402, this is updates to our aftermarket cost recovery for extremely long start ELC resources. These changes are outlined in a large attachment O, clarifying how resources can apply for cost recovery aftermarket cost recovery, and also still work with the RLC process. We did address SRP's questions last month. No, we did extend this one an extra month to make sure that we addressed all questions, and we haven't received any new questions in the last month. We're in the post-final decision stage with this one. Any questions on this one?
Hi, everyone. I just want to let you know we will be going a little bit after 12 today to finish out the PRRs. I just wanted to be respectful of everyone's time and give you a heads up. Are there any questions for any of the PRRs that haven't been asked that Michael just went over? Okay, not seeing or hearing any. Thank you, Michael. I just kind of cut in there. So the next and final BPM that we are going to be reviewing is settlements and billing BPM. We have 4 that are in the initial stage and 6 that are in the recommendation stage. First, I'd like to discuss PRR 1437. This was submitted by SRP. So if anyone from SRP would like to make a comment on this PRR or have any information they'd like to add, please hit #2 or raise your hand in the Webex. So PRR 1437 was submitted to update the settlement BPM for the new settlement timeline. The reason was that the current BPM does not have the newly updated timeline in the settlement section. So far, we have not received any initial comments, and it expired on May 17th. The ISO does need additional time to review the request for PRR 1437 and make sure we have proper time to review and update settlement sections that need to be updated. So we are going to extend the initial comment section for this specific PRR for another month to allow us to review that. Are there any questions, concerns, or is SRP on the phone to provide any additional information about the PRR they submitted? Okay, I do not see or hear any additional comments. So the rest of the settlements PRRs, I'm going to hand over to Massey to discuss. Massey?
Thank you, Nicole. Hello, everyone. My name is Massey Amati, and I'll be going over settlements PRRs. Nicole has already gone through 1437. Now let's focus on 1436, update BPM configuration guide for charge code 4575 to clarify business rule 4.1 exclusions covering flexible ramping. We haven't received any comments on this one, and the comment period expires May 17th. Next step is post recommendation. Any questions on this? Next one, PR 135, update configuration guide to match settlement BPM formula and virtual bid adjustment for WEIM market balancing authority areas as configured. No comments on this, and it will expire May 17th. And the next step is to post recommendation. Any questions on PR 1435? PR 1431, update charge code 6046 over and under scheduling WEIM allocation to accommodate resource efficiency evaluation enhancements phase 1. We haven't received any comments. Comment period expires May 17th, and we are in post recommendation phase. Any questions on this one? Next is PR 1427, update BPM for settlement billing to accommodate aligning with annual FERC settlement process defined in charge code 550 and 551 FERC fee settlement. We haven't received any comments. Comment period expires May 17th. And next step is to post final decision for this PR. Any questions on PR 1427? PR 1426, update configuration guide to support short, long start unit defined definition update initiative. We haven't received any comments on this. And next, the comment period expires May 17th. Next step is post final decision. Any questions on PR 1426? PR 1425, update charge code pre-calc meter subsystem deviation quantity to capture spend, non-spend, IIE, and instructed and balanced energy under scenarios where the resource was exceptional in dispatch and non-contingency interval. We haven't received any comments on this. Comment period expires May 17th, and the next step is post-final decision. Any questions on PR 1425? PR 1422, update multiple BPM configuration guide for charge code 6045 over and under scheduling WEIM settlement and 6046 over and under scheduling WEIM market allocation to accommodate MEAF 2021-100. We haven't received any comments on this. Recommendation period expires May 17th, and next step is post-final decision. Any questions on PR 1422? PR 1421, update multiple BPM configuration guide to accommodate invoicing issue discovered during functional testing of shortfall charge code that have never been run in settlement production since their inception. We haven't received any comments on this. Comment period expires May 17th, and next step is post-final decision. Any question on PR 1421? PR 1419, update charge code 6456 to implement changes related to tariff clarification filing. We haven't received any comments here. Recommendation period ends May 17, and next step is post final decision. Any question on PR 1419? Okay, that's you got it. Thank you, Nicole.
So are there any additional questions that anyone would like to ask? As a reminder, please hit #2 if you're only on the telephone, or raise your hand in the Webex. All right, thank you everyone for joining the call today. Our next BPM PRR meeting will be June 28th at 11 a.m. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns that you did not get to address due to time constraints, or you need some additional information, please email us at bpm_cm@kyso.com. Thank you all, and I hope you have a great day.